Today's hearing is entitled Economic Diversification to Create Prosperous Tribal Economies. Today we will hear from tribal stakeholders on ways tribes have diversified their economies to create jobs, revenue, and opportunities that benefit tribes, tribal members, and their communities. Every local, state, federal, and tribal government knows that a diverse economy is healthy and resilient and will encourage entrepreneurship, innovation, and ultimately human flourishing. Since the 1970s, the federal government has embraced a tribal policy of self-determination, which supports tribal governments to self-direct both services provided to their people and economic development plans that support tribal government services. Tribes have consistently sought to diversify their tribal economies through various means so that they can expand services to tribal members and build sustainable economies to benefit current and future generations. Many tribes have pursued agriculture, gaming, natural resource development, business ventures, tourism, and other avenues to build their economies. These ventures have impacted not only tribes and tribal members, but also the surrounding communities. In January 2020, estimates showed that tribal governments and tribal economies and economic enterprises provided over 1.1 million jobs within the U.S. economy, with most jobs held by non-tribal members. In many places, particularly our rural communities where tribes are present, the tribe or tribal enterprises are the leading employer in the area. For example, the collective tribal nations of Oklahoma contribute $15.6 billion to the economy and 113,442 jobs in 2019 alone. Over the years, they also contributed over $1.8 billion to public education and mental health services, with an additional $84 million going to support schools, municipalities, and other community initiatives. All that said, the overall impact of tribes on the U.S. economy is expansive and generally underreported. However, there continues to be many barriers for tribes when it comes to economic development and diversification. Real property is one of, if not the most important economic resource that our tribes have. Yet there are still a multitude of restrictions and requirements that can dictate how and when land can be used, depending on its status. This subcommittee has held several hearings that have highlighted how bureaucratic red tape can stymie land use and natural resource development. Streamlining regulatory requirements so they are not duplicative or burdensome is crucial. Tribal nations and enterprises have also engaged in the recreation and tourism industries to tell their own stories and to develop unique experiences for domestic and international tourists. In 2021, American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian-owned tourism businesses provided 117,852 jobs across 40,618 businesses. These native tourism businesses contributed $14 billion to the total $1.7 trillion U.S. tourism-related industry. Tribes have had to overcome the challenge of not having a property tax base and have sought diverse revenue streams through business ventures. They have developed corporate structures that are sophisticated and innovative to enable incomes to tribal governments so that governmental services can be provided to members and supplement the federal funds that already support health and human services to our tribal members. I look forward to hearing all about how economic diversification has benefited tribes and where we can go from here. I again want to thank the witnesses for being with us today, and I look forward to hearing your testimony. I'd like to ask Mr. Hastine, Ms. Rupert, and Mr. Bacon, because I think, Mr. Morgan, you've given us some good ideas in terms of this next question I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask each of you to respond to this question. What have you found is particularly helpful for rural communities to expand tribal economic diversification, and what challenges and opportunities particularly exist in the more rural areas? Mr. Hastine?
I think what you really have to understand is in rural areas, the cost of anything is about doubled. And without taking that into consideration, I'll give you an example. In order for us to pave 1 mile of road is $3 million. And that's insane because we have to literally purchase materials that are off the nation. We don't have access to our own resources because it's just become a bureaucratic nightmare in trying to request, even for technical assistance from the Department of the Interior at times, to develop the mineral and leasing regulations that it requires. And as we have stated in a previous testimony, one of the other challenges involved is if we start going the route to exercise our self-determination, then we lose all access to some of the federal resources, including the data sets. And that is really concerning to us because, Navajo Nation, when we requested to start implementing some of our leasing regulations for minerals, we wanted to start off with one or two minerals. We don't want to adopt the entire thing, but it just seems that the position of the federal government is you have to adopt all of it. And that causes problems for us because there are different minerals that require us to really think about how we're going to develop a comprehensive essentially an environmental policy within our own nation. So if we could figure out a way to reduce some of those bureaucratic red tapes to access some of our resources to help reduce construction costs for infrastructure, that would really help out.
Wonderful, good ideas. And Ms. Rupert, what are some of the challenges and what are some of the things that you have found particularly helpful?
So challenges, this is all connected, right? Economic development, and talked about roads. You have to have roads in order for visitors to come out and experience your attraction or your destination. So that's always a huge barrier as well. But I look at cultural tourism as an opportunity for our rural communities, for our rural tribes. There's not too much infrastructure that is needed for cultural tourism. It's all about our people and our stories and our places. And that's what I always tell, tribes that are struggling. Well, who would want to come see us? And it's the international market that is very interested in coming and experiencing our culture. Okay. So it is us, it is our people that that people want to come and see and experience.
I like that story. I don't think anyone else has ever said it the way that you have, and I appreciate the way that you have put that. And maybe there are ways that we can help from the tourism standpoint. Very quickly, Mr. Bacon, if you have some ideas on this, and then I'm going to give a challenge to all four of you before we leave today. So, Mr. Bacon, some of the challenges and some of the things that have worked.
Thank you for that question. With UROC economic development, particularly helpful for us is developing our own workforce. And that's the main focus, is developing our staff. It's, as we describe it, it's grow your own, because no one really wants to live in the rural areas or move to the rural areas. The challenges that we have in the rural area is the lack of housing, adequate housing that's not HUD funded. So in order to attract these individuals that are highly qualified, we need adequate housing within our area. Development would be a beneficial factor.
And Mr. Morgan, you've also given us some ideas of both the challenges and the things that have actually worked. So here's my challenge to all four of you. Have you identified the top 5 things that we could do as Congress within your particular areas? I know that every one of your reservations and the areas that you represent are very different from each other. But what I'd like to do is find a way to legislatively address the barriers that you have. We have them when we develop in Wyoming, whether it's oil and gas on the reservation or it's oil and gas off the reservation on BLM lands. We have challenges with those barriers as well. What I'd like to do is, every one of you have brought a very interesting story today about what your needs are and what has worked for your individual members. What I'd like you to do is bring to us the solutions, legislative solutions you think that we could do to help you to address the fact that you've got an enormous reservation, the fact that you might have more of an urban area, the fact that you've got the challenges with the tourism and not being able to access some of the resources that other people can. Help us to help you. Help us to come up with ideas for legislation, because I'm all ears. If you want to come to my office and sit down and talk about ways that we can draft bills that will work for you, I want to talk about it.